Aloha. Now I'm going to demonstrate the art of casting, particularly casting stones. The art of casting is one of the oldest skills that we can find in any culture, because people have always wanted to know the unknown. And they've tried all different kinds of things and developed all different kinds of tools to try and get that information about the unseen, information about the future, information about what's going on in a larger scheme of things. And one of the tools they've developed is this idea that we call casting. Now, casting is simply getting some kind of object or series of objects and throwing them out in front of you or laying them out in front of you in order to have a pattern that you can read. So you have to have the objects, and each one of those objects has to have a meaning. You have to have a meaning then also for the different patterns that can be thrown. One of the very oldest is casting the bones, and dice are a modern outgrowth of that old system of casting. The I Ching from China is another system of casting, originally done with the stalks of a plant, and then finally done with coins to make it easier and simpler. Tarot cards are another form of casting. The runes that many people are now familiar with that were used in Scandinavia, that's another form of casting. But we're going to go back to some very, very old methods. And what I'm going to present to you now was developed by me taking ideas from Africa, West Africa, where I spent 7 years studying with the shamans there, and as well as from Hawaii, where most of my life studies have taken place, have come from. So I'm going to present now the system and then show you various ways to use it for casting. We have here a bag of stones, and these happen to be semi-precious stones. And in this system, each one of these stones has a meaning. And then we have patterns for those meanings. The first one we're going to do, the most basic and most simple, is just to get answers to questions for yes and no. We don't need all the stones for that, so I'll set some of these aside. And the ones that we'll keep are the white. And the white stone, it can also be a clear quartz, that doesn't matter. But the white stone is called the kumu. That means the foundation stone, the stone from which the meanings of all the other stones are taken. So we have the kumu, and then in this particular part of the system, we have a red stone that represents no, in this case, and a green stone that represents yes. And you can think of a stoplight if you want to. So we have, what we do when we want to ask a question is we first of all go through a process of relaxation and centering. So I might as well bring this one in here right now. One of the best simple processes for centering, relaxing, as well as increasing your energy is something we call pico pico. Pico pico is a way of breathing with your attention. So it's normal breathing, but what you do is you shift your attention while you're breathing. There's many, many uses for this, and you'll find many of those in the book Urban Shaman. But right now I'll demonstrate the process. What you do when you inhale is put all of your attention on the top of your head. When you exhale, you put all of your attention at your navel. So it's inhale with your attention on the crown, exhale with your attention on your navel. Now, if you want to, you can put your hands there until you get used to feeling those places. You are not trying to bring energy in, and you're not trying to send energy out. All you have to do is move your attention back and forth, and the energy knows where to go. So we start this process with this centering, energizing, relaxing process of some kind. Pico pico is what we'll use now. Then you form in your mind the question that you want to know that can be answered by yes or no. And then you toss the stones and get the answer. Now, let's talk first a bit of how this is supposed to work, because that's easy enough to do. But remember that second principle that said there are no limits. Everything is connected. The idea behind this is that when you relax and focus your attention, you are connected to whatever your attention is on. And that when you ask for information or you ask a question, then that information then becomes available to your ku. Remember that part of your three selves, which is the body sensory awareness. It's aware not only of the external senses, but what we might call their internal equivalents. So your ku becomes aware of the information. Then when you cast the stones, the ku knows exactly, because it knows the pattern that's needed to give you an answer, because it has the answer. When you cast the stones, it knows how to move your hand in just the right position, even when you were going to shake the stones first, and so it knows how to just the right shaking that'll position them properly, move your hand properly, take into account gravity and air resistance and friction on the ground, and all of that added together is used in order to give you the answer. This is the theory behind it. So we would ask a question, something like, you can ask a question about the past, the present, or the future. You can ask a question about your own internal beliefs, so you can, in a way, question your ku. You can ask also about the future. When you're asking about the future, however, like, will I be healthy, wealthy, and rich, and happy, and will I find my true love, whatever. When you're asking about the future, remember the fourth principle that says now is the moment of power. So the idea here is that you are always getting an answer about the present moment. And what would happen if all of the ideas and beliefs and attitudes of the present moment were carried forward without change? And so that's the answer that you get. Because in Hawaiian thinking, in this shamanistic type of thinking, the future can be changed. And all we have to do to change the future is change what we're doing in the present. So what we're getting here is an answer about what we might call a probable future or a possible future. Now that can be valuable because we discover the patterns that are building, that are existing right now, that could lead to a particular event. And if we want to change that outcome, then we take that information and start changing things now. So let's take a question. I'll take a personal question that would be of great interest to me, and you can do the same for yourself. But I'll say, will my new book be a bestseller? Right? So we'll do some pico pico first. Think of the question, will my new book be a bestseller? Shake the stones, toss them out. Now, this is an interesting situation because what we have is a very definite maybe. Okay? Because the answer is determined by which stone falls closest to the white. And what we see here, even looking up above, is that they're almost exactly the same. So I got a very definite maybe on this one, which means all the more that it's going to depend on what I do, what I think, what I believe, how well I write, because it's not written yet. And so all of those are factors right now. So it's really also in a way saying there's not enough information in this present moment. And I can understand that because since the book is not completely written, There are too many other factors of how the book could turn out before it's finally presented. So we have an accurate answer based on the amount of information available at this moment. So let's take and let's ask a different one. Okay. Let's say, for instance, here's a plan. I'm planning on taking a trip in another year, and I'm going to be doing some teaching on that trip. And so let's see whether it lies in the future that this is going to be a very financially successful teaching, very financially successful journey. So let's see. We'll focus on this. Some pico pico. Will this trip that I have planned for teaching be financially successful? Now there we have clear indication of yes. Yes, this is going to be financially successful because the green stone is closest to the white stone. And that's how you determine the answer, by whichever stone is closest. But what happens if you get a no answer about something that you really care about? Then what do? You don't want to accept that as the final answer, because remember, the future can be changed. At the same time, you don't want to just toss over and over again, because then your subconscious will know that all you want is the right answer, doesn't matter about the event, and you won't get accuracy. So there's something very powerful that you can do. Looks and sounds strange unless you have some background in the shamanic thinking. But because all we have in the present moment is patterns, if we change those patterns and hold on to them, we change the future outcome. So let's suppose that I had tossed the stones. Let's suppose I had asked whether I will find my true love in this coming year, or whether I will find a great relationship in the coming year. I'm not going to actually toss them for myself since I have a great relationship. But if I were going to ask such a question, or even if I asked if it were possible for me to have a wonderful relationship with another person, and let's suppose what I got was a definite no. Now that would be, it doesn't have to be behind, this could be over here. But let's suppose I got a definite no to that question. Will I have a great relationship? And the answer comes out no. Well, this does not mean that I have to be a hermit, that I have to give up, that there's anything wrong with me. It means that according to all my beliefs, the prevailing beliefs of anybody I might meet, my fears, my angers, my limitations, limitations existing right now in the world, this is the most likely outcome. So we want to change that. So yes, I could stop and simply begin working on myself, and that would definitely start changing the future. But there's something direct and powerful that we can do right now, and this is what it is. What we do is we do the pico pico again. After we've seen this and accepted this as the answer, we do the pico pico again. Breathe and relax. Say, all right, this is the way I want it to be, like that. So listen up, cool, send out the message, we're going to have that great relationship. And you sit there and you breathe deep with energy and you focus on the new pattern that you have created. And the more energy and emotion you can put into it and physically move it, and keep repeating, that's the new pattern. That'll start to break up those other fear patterns or whatever other limitations might be in there. It'll start to break them up and open you up to new opportunities, new ways of thinking, new ways of acting that will help bring about that actual result that you want. But you start by breaking and changing the pattern, not out of fear of the old other one, but out of a deep desire for the new pattern that you want to establish. Okay. Well, that's yes, no. Now we bring in all 7 stones, and for this part we give each one a meaning. And it may not come as a surprise, but we're going to relate each of the stones to one of the principles. So we start off with white, representing Ike, the first principle, and the keyword concept of awareness. We bring in red for Kala. There are no limits, with the keyword of freedom. Orange for Makia. Energy flows where attention goes, and the keyword of focus. Yellow for Manawa. Now is the moment of power, and the keyword of either presence or persistence. Green for Aloha. To love is to be happy with the keyword of love. Blue for Mana. All power comes from within, with the keyword of confidence. And Pono. Effectiveness is the measure of truth, with the keyword of flexibility, because you want to do whatever is appropriate and effective. So what we're going to do with these stones now is ask questions that have to do with advice, because sometimes it's not yes or no that we need, but what do I do now? So if we have such a question, for instance, let's go back to the one that we're working with as a yes-no. Say, okay, I want a great relationship. I changed that pattern, but now what's the most important thing for me to do to prepare myself in order to have that great relationship? Now, of course, the stones are relating this to me, and you may get a totally different answer. And so I'll say, I'll apply this to a great relationship with someone with whom I can discuss philosophy and shamanism in depth. Okay? So yeah, that's a kind of relationship that I would like to have. Someone that I can really talk about the deepest aspects of this knowledge and tradition with. So, what can I change, or what can I do in order to bring this kind of relationship into my life? I start with Pico Pico. I form that question in my mind very clearly. What can I do to bring such a relationship into my life? I shake the stones, and I toss them out. Now, what we see in all the stones over here, except this one, so close it's touching. And the one that's touching the white, which means it's very important, is the second principle, which is Kala. There are no limits. And freedom is the key word. In this case, what it seems to be telling me is that I have some limited thinking about there being such a person. Right? So what I have to do is free up my thinking about that to open myself to such a relationship, to give myself the idea that it's possible as well as good to allow it into my life. It's freedom that I have to develop. Freedom from the doubts, the fears, the limiting kind of thoughts that I might have in regard to this relationship. Now, let's just do something else here to show you. Let's suppose that I had gotten a different answer. Let's suppose that I had gotten an answer that had the orange stone. In this case, the answer would have been, I've got to focus on it more. Okay? I haven't been focusing on it. I haven't even had it in my mind as a strong enough idea, so what I have to do is focus more. Let's suppose that the answer had been the yellow stone. Right? Now is the moment of power. Well, what I've got to do is persist in looking for such a person. I might be focusing, but I've got to take some action in the present moment. Maybe start talking about shamanism in greater depth when I meet people. That could be the answer relating to this one. Okay? Let's suppose that the answer I had gotten would have been green. And here, this has to do with love, in that case also motivation. So here I would start to think, well, how much do I want this kind of a relationship? And so I would increase my desire for it, or increase my love of that kind of conversation, and that would be the thing for me to do, if this had been the answer that I received. And if I had received the blue stone as an answer, then I might have said, well, I've got to believe in it. My confidence has not been great enough. So I've got to increase my belief, perhaps through affirmation, visualization, acting out, whatever it might be, but confidence is what I would need to increase. And if my answer had been the purple stone, then it would have been, because that represents flexibility, then maybe I've got to be flexible about the kind of person and the kind of things we talk about. So maybe I'd want to expand the range of topics so that there would be something that this other person might be even more interested in that I could share with them, and not limit it so much. So that's a possibility. Be more flexible in what I want, or in my approach to getting what I want. So those are ideas. Remember, the actual answer I got was this one. But if I had gotten any of those others, you could also interpret them in terms of the meaning of the principle or the meaning of the keyword. And that's casting for advice. One of the oldest systems of all is what we can call picture casting, and very confusing to researchers. But what's going on in picture casting is that instead of tossing out a cast that has meaning in terms of the individual objects, what you're doing is tossing out a pattern and then looking at that pattern as if it were an image. So let's take you can say, give me an image, is your question. Give me an image of this relationship, give me an image of my financial possibilities, give me an image of my spiritual growth, give me an image of this or that. It doesn't always have to be for yourself. So I'm going to toss for an image relating to our organization. And so give me an image of the growth of Aloha International over the coming year. And so I do my pico pico. Focus on my question. Shake the stones, give me an image of the growth of Aloha International over the coming year. Now, my role is to look at this pattern as if it were a picture, almost like connecting dots. Now, you're going to see it from a different perspective than I am, but what I've got to try to do is look at this to see what kind of thing it might be. And so you use memory association, whatever ideas that might come up, anything that can help you give you some kind of an indication about it. What I get here is some kind of a vehicle. So for me, it looks like here's somebody in the driver's seat, and interestingly, that happens to be love in the driver's seat. And here's the front of the vehicle, and from where I'm looking, why, these can be the wheels. And so what we're doing is we're going forward, and the wheels happen to be awareness and confidence. Those are the things that keep us on the ground. We're driving force is love, and we're steering with effectiveness. And of course the others have their place in there, but this shows me that we're moving forward. And we're moving forward very well with all the right tools and possibilities. And so whatever you might be interested, what this gives you is more of a feeling sense, and it helps to develop all of these things help to develop your intuition, but this one perhaps most of all, because it trains you to be aware of images and the feeling of those images rather than their logical explanation. And so it takes you into the deeper realms of intuition. And if you practice with the stones, the more you practice, the more your intuition will develop, the more you'll be able to get the answers that you want simply by focusing and asking. Before you can even reach for the stones, you'll have the yes or no, the advice, or the pictures. And then every once in a while, just to kind of retrain your ku, to remind yourself of the process, you can use the actual stones. But they're best used as a training device to develop your intuition.